In the summer of 2024, historian Dr. Sarah Mitchell made what would become one of the most disturbing discoveries in American photographic history. While cataloging items from an estate sale in Salem, Massachusetts, she uncovered a photograph that would challenge everything experts thought they knew about early 20th century child photography. The image appeared ordinary at first glance, a young girl, approximately 8 years old, standing before an ornate wooden fence in 1903. The child wore a pristine white dress with delicate lace trim, her dark hair pulled back with a silk ribbon. What immediately captured Dr. Mitchell's attention was the girl's radiant smile, wide and genuine, suggesting pure childhood joy frozen in time. The photograph bore the embossed mark of J. Morrison Photography Studio, Salem, Mass, along the bottom corner. For 1903, the image quality was remarkably sharp, with every detail rendered in stunning clarity, from the intricate patterns on the child's dress to the weathered texture of the wooden fence behind her. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, the estate sale coordinator, explained that the photograph came from the old Blackwood family collection. The Blackwoods had been prominent mill owners in Salem for generations, and this particular image was discovered in a locked chest in the mansion's basement, alongside dozens of other family photographs spanning several decades. According to the estate records, the photograph had remained untouched for over a century. The family had no immediate heirs, and most of their personal documentation had been lost or destroyed over the years, leaving the identities of the people in the photographs largely unknown. Dr. Mitchell, specializing in early American childhood history, had examined thousands of similar images throughout her career. Yet, something about this particular photograph compelled her to purchase it immediately. The technical quality seemed almost too advanced for its era, and there was an indefinable quality about the child's expression that she couldn't quite articulate. What Dr. Mitchell didn't realize at that moment was that she had just acquired a piece of evidence that would unravel one of Salem's most closely guarded secrets, a secret that had been hiding in plain sight for over 120 years, waiting for someone with the right tools and expertise to finally reveal the truth about what really happened to the children of Salem in 1903. Back in her laboratory at Boston University, Dr. Mitchell began her standard examination process using state-of-the-art digital scanning equipment. The photograph, measuring 8 by 10 inches, was in remarkably good condition despite its age. The album and print showed no signs of the typical deterioration expected from early 1900s photography. No fading, no chemical staining, and no physical damage. As she placed the photograph under her high-resolution scanner, Dr. Mitchell noted several unusual characteristics. The depth of field was exceptionally sharp for period photography, and the lighting appeared professionally controlled, suggesting the use of advanced studio equipment that would have been expensive and rare in 1903 Salem. The digital scan revealed extraordinary detail. Every fold in the child's dress, every strand of her carefully arranged hair, and every grain in the wooden fence appeared with startling clarity. But it was when Dr. Mitchell began to magnify specific areas of the image that she noticed something that made her breath catch in her throat. At 200% magnification, the child's smile remained perfect, too perfect perhaps. At 400% magnification, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge around the edges of her mouth. But it was at 800% magnification that Dr. Mitchell saw what would haunt her for weeks to come. The child's eyes, which had appeared bright and joyful in the original image, revealed something entirely different under extreme magnification. Where there should have been the natural spark of childhood innocence, there was instead an unmistakable emptiness, a hollow quality that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. Dr. Mitchell leaned back in her chair, removing her glasses to rub her tired eyes. She had spent 15 years examining historical photographs, and she had never seen anything quite like this. The technical impossibility of achieving such detail in 1903, combined with the disturbing quality of the child's magnified expression, suggested something far more complex than a simple family portrait. She immediately began cross-referencing the image with her database of known photographers from the Salem area. J. Morrison Photography Studio appeared in city records from 1901 to 1905, but curiously, no other examples of Morrison's work existed in any museum collections or historical archives. It was as if this single photograph was the only surviving evidence of the studio's existence. The inconsistencies were mounting, and Dr. Mitchell realized she needed to dig deeper into Salem's history to understand what she had discovered. What she would uncover would shake her understanding of both photography and the dark chapters of American medical history that many preferred to forget. Dr. Mitchell's first step was to contact the Salem Historical Society, hoping to find more information about the Blackwood family and J. Morrison Photography Studio. The Society's archives, housed in a converted 18th century building near the famous witch trial sites, contained extensive records of Salem's industrial families. Margaret Thompson, the Society's chief archivist, greeted Dr. Mitchell with enthusiasm. The Blackwoods were indeed a prominent family, she explained, pulling several boxes of documents from the climate-controlled storage area. They owned 3 textile mills and employed nearly a quarter of Salem's workforce at their peak. The records painted a picture of a successful but secretive family. Edmund Blackwood, the patriarch in 1903, had inherited the mills from his father and expanded the business considerably. However, there were gaps in the family documentation, particularly concerning Edmund's children and their activities in the early 1900s. There's something odd about their record keeping, Margaret noted, flipping through ledger books and correspondence. Most wealthy families from this period kept meticulous records of births, deaths, social events, and family photographs, but the Blackwood records become strangely sparse around 1902 and 1903. Dr. Mitchell examined the available documents carefully. There were references to Edmund Blackwood's involvement in various social causes, including contributions to what were described as progressive medical research initiatives and child welfare studies. However, the specific nature of these activities was never detailed. More intriguing was a series of receipts and payment records showing significant sums paid to various photographers, including several payments to J. Morrison Photographic Services between 1902 and 1904. The amounts were substantial, far more than typical portrait photography would command. City directory from 1903 listed J. Morrison Photography Studio at 47 Chestnut Street, but when Dr. Mitchell visited the location, she found only a narrow alley between two commercial buildings. There was no evidence that a photography studio had ever existed at that address. The Salem City records showed that the building permits and business licenses for the studio had been properly filed and approved. However, there were no tax records, no advertising in local newspapers, and no mention of the studio in any contemporary accounts or social columns. Unusual for a business serving Salem's elite families. As Dr. Mitchell delved deeper into the municipal records, she discovered something that made her increasingly uncomfortable. During 1903, Salem had experienced an unusually high number of what were officially recorded as childhood accidents and sudden illnesses among the children of wealthy families. The death certificates, when she could locate them, were signed by the same physician, Dr. Cornelius Whitmore, and bore remarkably similar language describing the causes of death. Dr. Cornelius Whitmore's name appeared repeatedly in Salem's medical records from 1902 to 1904, but his background proved difficult to trace. Dr. Mitchell discovered that Whitmore had arrived in Salem in late 1901, claiming credentials from European medical schools, but no verification of his education existed in any accessible archives. What was documented was Whitmore's rapid rise to prominence among Salem's wealthy families. Within months of his arrival, he had established a private practice catering exclusively to the children of the city's industrial elite, including the Blackwoods. His specialty was listed as pediatric nervous disorders and developmental abnormalities. Medical journals from the period revealed that the early 1900s were a time of experimental approaches to childhood. Psychology and development, treatments that would later be recognized as barbaric, were then considered cutting-edge medical science. Dr. Whitmore had published several papers in obscure medical journals, advocating for photographic documentation as a diagnostic tool in treating what he termed constitutional melancholia in children. Dr. Mitchell found copies of Whitmore's published papers in the medical library at Harvard University. His writing described elaborate photographic sessions designed to capture the essential nature of childhood disturbance and document the progression of treatment interventions. The papers made frequent reference to collaboration with skilled photographic technicians capable of producing images of unprecedented clarity and diagnostic value. The connection to J. Morrison Photography Studio became clearer when Dr. Mitchell discovered a private correspondence between Whitmore and Edmund Blackwood, preserved in a legal file related to the Blackwood estate. In a letter dated March 15, 1903, Whitmore wrote, "The photographic documentation continues to yield remarkable insights. Morrison's technical innovations have allowed us to capture details previously invisible to the naked eye. The subjects remain cooperative and the treatments are proceeding as planned." Edmund Blackwood's response, dated March 22, 1903, was equally cryptic. "Your work with the children has exceeded our expectations. The financial arrangements with Morrison will continue as long as the documentation meets your specifications. Discretion, as always, remains paramount." These letters suggested a relationship between the Blackwood family, Dr. Whitmore, and J. Morrison that went far beyond typical medical treatment or family portrait photography. The emphasis on unprecedented clarity and invisible details seemed to align perfectly with the technical anomalies Dr. Mitchell had observed in the photograph of the smiling child. More disturbing was the discovery of medical supply orders placed by Dr. Whitmore during 1903. The records showed purchases of large quantities of sedatives, restraints, and photographic chemicals, an unusual combination for a pediatric practice. The orders were paid for by the Blackwood Family Trust, suggesting their direct financial involvement in Whitmore's activities. Armed with this new information, Dr. Mitchell returned to her laboratory to examine the photograph with fresh perspective. She now understood that what she was looking at wasn't simply a family portrait. but potentially a piece of medical documentation from Dr. Whitmore's experimental treatments. Under extreme magnification, the child's hollow eyes took on a more sinister significance. Dr. Mitchell consulted with colleagues in medical history, sharing enlarged sections of the photograph without revealing its full context. Dr. James Crawford, a specialist in 19th century medical practices, provided a chilling assessment. The expression you're showing me is consistent with the effects of certain pharmaceutical interventions used in early psychiatric treatment, Dr. Crawford explained during their video conference. Specifically, this resembles the vacant stare associated with prolonged exposure to chloral hydrate or similar sedatives. The child appears conscious, but completely dissociated from their surroundings. This revelation sent Dr. Mitchell back to Dr. Whitmore's medical supply orders. Among the chemicals he had purchased in large quantities was chloral hydrate, along with other substances now known to have severe psychological effects on developing minds. The quantities suggested treatment of multiple subjects over extended periods. Dr. Mitchell began cross-referencing the dates of Whitmore's supply orders with Salem's death records. A disturbing pattern emerged. Children from wealthy families who had been under Whitmore's care showed a marked increase in mortality rates during the exact periods when his chemical purchases peaked. The death certificates, all signed by Whitmore himself, listed causes ranging from sudden cardiac failure to respiratory complications, arising from nervous exhaustion. However, the similarity in language and timing suggested a coordinated effort to obscure the true circumstances of these children's deaths. Further investigation revealed that the Blackwood family had not been Whitmore's only patrons. At least 6 other prominent Salem families, the Wessons, the Pickerings, the Havens, the Storos, the Adamses, and the Phillipses, had made similar financial arrangements with both Whitmore and J. Morrison Photography Studio during the same period. Each family had lost at least one child between 1902 and 1904. Each child had been under Dr. Whitmore's care for what were described as developmental concerns or nervous dispositions. And each family had paid substantial sums to J. Morrison for specialized photographic services in the months preceding their child's death. The photograph Dr. Mitchell had discovered was not an isolated artifact. It was evidence of a systematic operation involving Salem's most powerful families, an unscrupulous physician, and a mysterious photographer who had documented what appeared to be the deliberate harming of children under the guise of medical treatment. As Dr. Mitchell's investigation deepened, she became increasingly puzzled by the technical aspects of the photograph itself. The image quality remained far superior to anything that should have been possible with 1903 photography equipment, even in the most advanced commercial studios. She consulted with Dr. Robert Hayes, a professor of photographic history at the Rochester Institute of Technology, sharing high-resolution scans of the image. Dr. Hayes's analysis confirmed her suspicions about the technical anomalies. What you're showing me appears to use a photographic process that wasn't developed until the 1920s, Dr. Hayes explained during their consultation. The tonal range, the depth of field, and especially the level of detail visible under magnification suggests the use of large format cameras and specialized lenses that simply weren't available in 1903. Dr. Hayes pointed out specific technical markers in the photograph that indicated advanced equipment. The even lighting suggested the use of multiple artificial light sources, precisely positioned and controlled. The film grain structure, visible only under extreme magnification, was consistent with photographic plates that wouldn't be manufactured until decades later. Either this photograph was taken much later than 1903 and artificially aged, Dr. Hayes concluded, or someone had access to photographic technology that was 20 to 30 years ahead of its time. This revelation led Dr. Mitchell to investigate J. Morrison's background more thoroughly. If the photographer had indeed possessed advanced equipment in 1903, there should be some record of how it was acquired or developed. Her search through patent records and import documentation yielded surprising results. Between 1901 and 1903, someone using the name J. Morrison had filed several patents for improved photographic apparatus and enhanced optical lens systems. The patent applications were highly technical, describing innovations in camera mechanics and chemical processing that wouldn't become standard in commercial photography for decades. More intriguingly, the Patent Office records showed that these applications had been sponsored and funded by a consortium of Salem businessmen, including Edmund Blackwood and several other families whose children had died under Dr. Whitmore's care. Customs records from Boston. Harbor revealed importation of specialized optical equipment from Germany during the same period. Consigned to Morrison Technical Services in Salem, the equipment manifests described precision-manufactured camera components, experimental lens systems, and rare chemical compounds used in advanced photographic processing. The evidence suggested that J. Morrison was not simply a local portrait photographer, but rather a technical innovator working with cutting-edge equipment specifically funded by Salem's wealthy families for unknown purposes. The advanced technology had been used to create photographic documentation with unprecedented detail and clarity. Documentation of Dr. Whitmore's medical experiments on their children, Dr. Mitchell realized that to understand the full scope of what had happened, she needed to identify the individual children who had been Whitmore's subjects. Using genealogical records and cemetery documentation, she began to trace the families whose children had died during the 1902-1904 period. The first breakthrough came when she discovered the burial records for Millicent Haven, age 8, who died on April 12, 1903, just weeks after the date written on the back of the photograph in Dr. Mitchell's possession. The timing was too coincidental to ignore, and Dr. Mitchell began to suspect that the smiling child in the photograph might be Millicent herself. Millicent's parents, Charles and Victoria Haven, had been prominent members of Salem society. Charles owned a successful shipping business, while Victoria was involved in various charitable organizations. Their daughter had been described in contemporary accounts as a bright, energetic child until early 1903, when she had begun receiving treatment from Dr. Whitmore for what family records described as episodes of melancholic disposition. Dr. Mitchell located Millicent's death certificate, signed by Dr. Whitmore and listing the cause of death as cardiac failure resulting from constitutional weakness. However, she also found a private letter from Victoria Haven to her sister, written 3 months after Millicent's death and preserved in a family collection donated to the Massachusetts Historical Society. The letter revealed Victoria's growing suspicions about her daughter's treatment. "I fear we were terribly mistaken to trust Dr. Whitmore with our dear Millicent. In her final weeks, she became increasingly distant and vacant, as if she were present in body but absent in spirit. The treatments he prescribed seemed to drain all joy from her, leaving only a hollow shell of our once vibrant child." More disturbingly, Victoria's letter described the photographic sessions. Dr. Whitmore insisted on extensive photographic documentation, claiming it was essential for monitoring Millicent's condition. Mr. Morrison would arrive with his unusual equipment, and they would spend hours photographing her in various poses and states. Millicent would smile for the camera as instructed, but her eyes had become so empty by then. Similar patterns emerged as Dr. Mitchell researched other families. Thomas Pickering, age 7, had died in May 1903 after months of Whitmore's treatment. His father's business diary contained entries describing concern about his son's increasing lethargy and disconnection from family activities. Caroline Wesson, age 9, had passed away in June 1903, with family letters describing her transformation from a spirited child to one who moved and spoke as if in a constant dream state. Each child's story followed the same tragic arc. Normal development until coming under Whitmore's care, followed by gradual decline in engagement and vitality, extensive photographic documentation by J. Morrison, and eventual death from mysterious causes that Whitmore attributed to underlying constitutional weaknesses. As Dr. Mitchell compiled evidence from multiple families, a horrifying picture began to emerge of a coordinated conspiracy involving Salem's most powerful citizens, an unethical physician, and an innovative photographer who documented their crimes with unprecedented technical precision. The conspiracy's scope became clear when Dr. Mitchell discovered meeting minutes from the Salem Progressive Medicine Society, a private organization founded in 1901 by Edmund Blackwood and other prominent citizens. The society's stated purpose was to advance the understanding of childhood development through innovative research methodologies. However, the society's private correspondence, preserved in Blackwood's estate papers, revealed a much darker agenda. The members were convinced that traditional methods of child rearing among the wealthy classes were producing children who were insufficiently hardened for the challenges of modern industrial society. Dr. Whitmore had convinced them that carefully controlled psychological stress, combined with pharmaceutical interventions, could strengthen the constitutional fiber of their children while eliminating weaknesses of character and temperament. The photographic documentation was supposedly necessary to track the progress of constitutional improvements in their subjects. A letter from Dr. Whitmore to Edmund Blackwood, dated February 1903, outlined the full scope of their activities. Our experimental protocols continue to yield valuable data about the malleability of young minds under controlled stress conditions. The photographic documentation Morrison provides allows us to observe changes invisible to casual observation, the gradual emergence of proper constitutional strength, even as superficial appearances might suggest decline. The letter continued with chilling clinical detachment. Some subjects naturally possess greater resilience than others. Those who fail to demonstrate adequate adaptive capacity are, regrettably, eliminated by the process itself. However, this natural selection serves our ultimate goal of identifying and preserving only the strongest genetic lines among Salem's leadership families. What Dr. Whitmore and his collaborators had created was essentially a eugenics program, using their own children as experimental subjects under the guise of progressive medical treatment. The advanced photographic equipment allowed them to document subtle changes in their victims' psychological states, creating a systematic record of the children's decline into what Whitmore described as constitutional compliance. The conspiracy had operated with complete impunity because it involved the city's most powerful families, and because the victims were their own children. No external authorities questioned the high mortality rates among Salem's elite families, particularly when the deaths were certified by a respected physician and attributed to natural causes. J. Morrison's role had been crucial. The advanced photographic technology allowed for documentation that revealed details invisible to the naked eye, enabling the conspirators to monitor their experiments with scientific precision while creating evidence that would seem innocuous to outside observers. Dr. Mitchell's investigation revealed that the conspiracy had ended abruptly in late 1904, not because of moral awakening among the participants, but because it had begun to attract unwanted attention from medical authorities in Boston and New York. Several prominent physicians had begun questioning the unusually high mortality rates among Salem's wealthy children, particularly given Dr. Whitmore's claims about his innovative treatments. Medical journals had started requesting more detailed information about Whitmore's methods, and some colleagues had expressed interest in visiting his practice to observe his techniques firsthand. Rather than risk exposure, the Salem Progressive Medicine Society had voted to terminate the program immediately. Dr. Whitmore had been quietly relocated to California with a substantial financial settlement, where records suggested he had changed his name and established a new practice under a different identity. J. Morrison had disappeared entirely, leaving behind only the advanced photographic equipment, which had been dismantled and disposed of by Blackwood family agents. All documentation of the Society's activities had been gathered and destroyed, except for the few items that had been accidentally preserved in personal papers or overlooked in storage. The cover-up had been remarkably thorough. Death certificates had been altered to remove any mention of Whitmore's involvement. Medical supply orders had been destroyed. Even the city records for J. Morrison Photography Studio had been modified to make it appear as though the business had never existed at the documented address. The families involved had maintained their silence through a combination of guilt, complicity, and mutual assured destruction. Each family knew that exposing the truth about their own children's deaths would implicate them in the deaths of other families' children as well. In the decades that followed, as the original participants aged and died, the secret had been passed down to their heirs as a dark family legacy that must never be revealed. The Blackwood family's decision to lock the photographs in a basement chest had been part of this ongoing concealment, too potentially incriminating to destroy, but too dangerous to allow into public view. By 2024, when Dr. Mitchell had discovered the photograph, all the original participants were long dead, and most of their descendants had only vague awareness of their family's involvement in something unspeakable during the early 1900s. The photograph had survived purely by accident, a single piece of evidence from a systematic program of child abuse and murder that had been carefully erased from official history. In her final analysis, Dr. Mitchell understood that the photograph of the smiling child, almost certainly Millicent Haven, represented something far more sinister than a simple family portrait. It was evidence of a conspiracy among Salem's elite families to use their own children as subjects in a twisted eugenics experiment, documented with cutting-edge technology that captured the gradual destruction of young minds and spirits. The child's hollow eyes, visible only under extreme magnification, revealed the true horror of what Dr. Whitmore had done to his victims. The advanced photographic techniques had captured not just Millicent's physical appearance, but the psychological emptiness that had replaced her natural childhood vitality, the result of months of pharmaceutical manipulation and psychological abuse. The technical impossibility of the photograph's quality in 1903 made perfect sense once Dr. Mitchell understood its true purpose. The conspirators had invested heavily in advanced equipment because they needed to document subtle changes that would be invisible to conventional photography. They were creating scientific evidence of their success in constitutional, strengthening evidence that actually showed the systematic destruction of children's minds. What made the photograph particularly disturbing was its dual nature. To casual observers, it appeared to show a happy, healthy child, exactly what the conspirators wanted people to see. But the advanced technology captured the truth beneath the surface. A child who had been chemically and psychologically manipulated into a state of complete dissociation from reality, smiling on command while experiencing profound psychological trauma. Dr. Mitchell's discovery had revealed one of the darkest chapters in American medical history, a systematic program of child abuse disguised as progressive medicine, conducted by the very people entrusted with protecting children, and hidden so effectively that it had remained secret for over 120 years. The photograph now served as evidence not just of individual tragedy, but of the lengths to which powerful people would go to advance their twisted ideologies, even at the cost of their own children's lives. It stood as a reminder that the most heinous crimes could be committed under the guise of respectability and scientific progress, particularly when those crimes were perpetrated by society's most trusted institutions. In the end, Millicent Haven and the other children who died under Dr. Whitmore's care had finally received the justice that had been denied them for over a century. Their stories, preserved accidentally in a single photograph, ensured that their suffering would not be forgotten, and that the truth about Salem's darkest secret would finally be told.